it often. I would say charity and justice and politics. And
there you go.
Interaction between justice and politics, and for that matter, politics and inner city ministry. So there's a bit more, there's a sort of a triangle there as to how they work out, trying to find that, keep alive that prophetic element in inner city ministry, which addresses itself not just to issues, but also to politics per se, knowing as I do from a lifetime of practicing politics, the limits of politics, but nonetheless the importance of it. And so that's, those were the kinds of things that were going through my head. And we certainly, in the time that we worked together in Winnipeg, Barry and I, although I must say I first met Barry at the Christian Resource Center when I was a student at Emmanuel, and something took me down there. To find that way of being in the world, which is both biblically prophetic, politically appropriate, and at the same time doing those works of immediate need, immediate charity that people need now. They can't wait for politics. So those are the kinds of things that were going through my head.
Thanks, Phil.
But it does seem to me that inner city ministries, at least some of those that I'm familiar with, that the prophetic dimension has faded, perhaps because people have been so overwhelmed, both in terms of diminishing resources on the church side, but increasing demands on the street side, that it's very seldom that one sees, the churches or individual ministries speaking out. On the other hand, it also could be that, as I've experienced this in Winnipeg, that mainstream church connected ministries don't get the same attention from the media. If somebody from a United Church outreach ministry says something, it's not as they would tend more to pick up on something that was said by an evangelical group or something like that. So there's all kinds of things at play here.
This is Bruce Taylor in Denver. Hey, Barry.
Hi, Bruce.
I think that the church in general needs to unpack and challenge the entire notion and use of the term charity within the church walls. As I look at it, charity is something that is optional for Christian and non-Christian, faith person or not, whereas justice is a commandment that needs to be attended to by any person of faith. Charity just is too much of an optional thing that has so much to do with how we feel about giving, rather than the compulsion to share what God has intended for all. And until the tall steeple churches, one of which I attend, really get to that notion of what is owed to the neighbor next door or around the world versus what we have an option to do to make us feel better about our turning our faces the other 6 days of the week. I think we're going to continue to have this problem.
Thanks, Bruce.
Yep.
It's Bill. I just want to tell people just a word that the Calgary Alliance for the Common Good is, Industrial Areas Foundation organization. And it took years and years of work to get the thing finally going. But in the last year, and Pierre Ann has done some amazing work with it on a number of issues, the advocacy function of unions and of churches and other community groups has really taken off with the Calgary Alliance. And we've won a couple of significant things at City Council in Calgary in tough economic times. So it's one of the little pieces of hope in our community. There are 30 different organizations that make up the Calgary Alliance, representing about 30,000 people. And the churches are front and center, but also the unions and other community organizations. So I just want to let people know around the country that that thing is moving along, and Pierre Ann is one of the key people in some of its advocacy work.
Well, good work to you both. There's some people from MVA on here too. I know, like Paul Clark and Naomi Farman and others. And Barry, do you have a new book coming out? Barry Reader and Jane Finch?
Yeah, well, it's kind of in the process. So I'm trying to co-write something with one of the residents in Jane and Finch, and but she's so busy dealing with all the crisis right now that I don't know if it's going to happen. So, but
press
anyways,
on anyway, Barry.
Yeah. So we'll
change.
yeah. But I think one of my concerns, and I'm really interested in reading the book, but I'm just wondering how much of that is based in the past of who we were as a church and where we are right now as a church, because my experience is that we're becoming a lot more insular and inward looking and self-survival and preservation of the institution versus outward looking and support of, community-based ministries, working for those in the margins. And, as churches shrink, I think in some ways we got a lot of assets, but we don't want to let those assets be dealt with and used for what I say real ministry. So we're too much into congregational ministry. Glad to hear, Bill, what's happening in Calgary. I wish more of that stuff was happening throughout the land.
Hear, hear. Go ahead, Paul. You have to unmute, Paul. We can't hear you, Paul. You have to unmute. There you go.
Sorry, double unmute. Did someone speak about MVA already? Just to follow up on Bill's comment from the Calgary Alliance, a ray of hope, Barry, and anyone else. We are doing some crazy stuff here. We've got roughly 50 organizations, faith, labor, and community groups, and it really is a wonderful, powerful feeling. We can't do it alone. We can't do it even within our own institutions. As Barry mentioned, there's a lot of insular, including my church, St. Catherine's in Edgemont Village here in North Vancouver. But when we join them all together, there's so much power. It's so cool to see the common ground that we can find working with other churches in particular, but also unions and schools. The amount of resources is exciting, and we've made some major wins here in Vancouver, including living wage and affordable housing and social isolation. So I'd love, if anybody wants to know what's going on there, you can give me a shout, or Barry obviously knows a lot about it too. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. And what about in Courtney, Joanne Keelan? You have to unmute. Unmute your. I don't think she's on.
Okay.
She's there. Yeah.
Well, now I'm in Victoria.
Oh, you're Victoria. My mistake.
Yeah. I think, but I could comment about Courtney, St. George.
Vancouver Island.
Yeah, Vancouver Island. I think St. George's United, which is right in the heart of downtown Courtney, is a real hub. That's where the meal program was. It's become, I think it's and other United churches are supporting it, but that's kind of the only game in town. Unfortunately, Comox United, which is in Comox, and very nice people that are all very well off. It's, you know, very far removed. It's far removed from the downtown, so they don't, you know, they don't see anything. So I'll just comment that I am a member of James Bay United here in Victoria, and we have an outreach worker, and our very Karen Dickey, very forward-thinking minister, and doing quite a bit. Well, were before COVID anyway, quite a lot in the whole neighborhood of James Bay.
Thanks, Joanne. Did you want to say something, Vicki, in Saskatoon? You got to unmute, Vicki. Unmute. You can tell how many of us are tech savvy. Vicki, go ahead. No, you got to unmute.
I'm back somewhere else.
Okay. There you go.
I'm chatting with Pam.
No.
Okay. Are you okay, Vicki?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Shalom. Shalom, Akalakayam.
Yeah, Vicki, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Oh, well, now I don't know what to say. Well, I can't, I'm here in Riversdale on Treaty 6 territory. And I mean, the big thing here is Indigenous justice, you know, stewardship of the land, UNDRIP. I live in this little area. You could say it's gentrifying, or you could say the neighborhood's being restored, but the big issue are finding the justice-seeking partnerships and justice for the land protectors. I'm not dwarfing, I'm being a bit inarticulate here right now because we have huge issues with, I can't even say here, the poverty, the gaps, the drugs, how to respond to it, and very small resources. We've just sold our church, St. Thomas Wesley, to an Eritrean Orthodox church. And they're a wonderful diaspora of immigrant Eritreans. And we still have a ministry out of our building because our people feel so committed to staying in the inner city of Riversdale. And we offer restorative justice into the mix. But we're actively discerning our future. We've just, through the sale of the building, we divested some monies to the greater church. And now we need to find partners to reimagine our presence here. I'll just stop here. Barry was a troublemaker 50 years ago in my life when I was a teenager in Castlegar in the youth group. Wait, that's another book. The Old Coffee House. He is an icon.
That was called The Establishment.
An iconic presence in Castlegar.
Thank you, Vicki. So, you know, I see Joni Wolf is on still. Joni, why don't you unmute and say, is it worth writing books nowadays, Joni? Does anybody read them? Joni's a professional editor.
Well, I don't know what to say to that, Barry.
Just say something.
I think books are still in vogue. I still like to hold them in my hand, and everybody can read them online too. But I've been very fortunate to work with Barry on his theses and his book, and with many other authors who have done some pretty neat work out there. I'm just finishing up on a book that's on a Mayan healer and her journey and her life. So yeah, I love books. That's it.
Thanks, Johnny. Maybe, does anybody else want to make a final comment?
Can you hear me, Barry?
Yeah, yes, John.
I only wanted to say that I think the other, you know, asking the questions about charity and justice and all that kind of thing, I think a huge role for the church right now that complements both is to amplify the voices that we are hearing. And I'm thinking of Black Lives Matter. I'm thinking of Idle No More. I'm thinking of also grassroots organizations that don't necessarily are rooted in the church, but have been many instances influenced by the church, and in essence are looking for, in a sense, the kingdom of God's imprint in the world to kind of determine methodology and process. And I think it's a great time for us to affirm the voices that, in essence, are saying in different ways the things that we all believe deeply, and just do our part, in a sense, to nourish a work that's not going to be easy, that's not going to be without obstacles, and in a sense requires a vocabulary that I think that we can have a positive influence on. So
I just want to reinforce Black Lives Matter, and here in Canada, Indigenous issues and their lives matter.
Yeah.
Here, here.
Yeah.
Time for some people to join the Jesuits, I would say, Jim.
Ah,
So your turn.
Okay.
I want to say something just about activism. And one of the things that gives me great joy, at least before the COVID came in, was every Friday going down in front of City Hall and standing with the Fridays for Future kids. And the energy and the vision and the sheer sort of joy of them doing their work around climate action. And then a few of us old farts show up and sort of stand in the background as, you know, old people of support. So in some ways, John, it's wherever I go, I try to amplify their voice, because they're giving tremendous leadership, and they're not all jaded like some of us. And so that actually every Friday at noon for an hour, my spirits are really lifted just by being in front of City Hall and on the streets with those kids.
Here, here. Al, you never mentioned the New Year's Eve vigil in front of the BC legislature in Victoria. Did you want to just mention why you do that on New Year's Eve?
Worship is or prayer, I shouldn't say worship, but prayer is a big part of the ministry. I'm asked to pray often. I'm just amazed with the Catholic influence on the street, old Catholic theology. So many call me Father, for example, and ask for prayer of that thing. And I just wanted to do something that was completely open to all. So it's completely silent, and we're asked to stand for 13 minutes for each province and territory across our country, thinking about the poor at that particular evening at midnight. And,
on New Year's Eve.
Yeah, so I'm joined by many faith, not only Christian faith, around that circle. I'm always amazed by the number that show up Christmas Eve to do that. You know, we're talking 80 or 90 people doing that. So it's one of the things that we do.
Thanks, Al. And Doug Flint, did you want to say anything from Winnipeg? Doug Flint? Unmute, Doug. There you go.
Well, it's rather, I thought I unmuted.
yeah, you're good.
You are, we hear you.
Okay. Being a few years older than you, Barry, I've been in around. It's interesting to find out what's going on now. I retired over, my wife took sick about 5 years ago from West Broadway Community Ministry, where we both volunteered for totally of a third of a century. And I agree with two things. Alliances with neighborhood groups and alliance, so that you have a strong voice and you affirm that the solution you're seeking is not one from your denominational bias, but from the community need and searching. And I also think that you'll never succeed. Success is a wrong word. You find solutions, because that implies justice for both parties, everyone involved.
That's what the
They
book's
come with
about.
just solution. You have a solution, not a success in community ministry. And next decade will bring you a whole new set of problems, and you look for solutions.
Hear, hear. Thank you, Doug.
You're welcome. Good. I like to see your voice. Is that beard as gray as mine? Or Bill's?
His is white. Actually. White.
That might be it, Pam.
Could be it. So I think I'll call it. And it's been wonderful to listen to all of you and the stories. And I just thought there's just such a wealth. I kind of wonder, you know, where the youth are. I mean, when I met Barry, I was like 24, 25, and literally changed my life to become someone who served most of my life in different ways. And the CUT program was very big for me in that. And I just wonder where those opportunities are to engage youth, but they're doing it in their own way in many ways.
They're out there.
The indigenous.
So you
So
want to find them, go to the streets.
exactly. So yeah, they are in the streets, and but I also wonder how the systemic changes will happen at the same time, because one can be in the street and see the fundamental changes. So we will all continue to do so. And thank you, Barry, for writing and continuing to write, and thank you all for showing up.
Thank you, Pam, for your facilitation.
Nice to hear you,
See
Barry.
Al Reeve Smith there.
Shalom. Thank you kindly.